So Mark cued us about the fact that we have lawyers and financial people and politicians and managers in the room, and therefore Rich and I decided absolutely no acronyms. And just in case either of us slip, we probably have to put something into the pot for funding the refreshments afterwards, right?
We did decide to allow one. ATSC, I figure, is an acronym we can use.
Okay. This, yeah, there we go. Oops, wrong way. Okay, so in the beginning, back in the days when we gave up on analog television and started out with digital, we put together a system that gave us A53, and it began at the input with audio and video and drove an encoder that complied with the Motion Picture Experts Group System 2. And it put out elemental streams, which fed a multiplexer and created a transport stream. And we had to have some data to tell us what was available and to signal the receivers. So we came up with a system called the Program System Information Protocol System. And that created an internet protocol output, which fed into the multiplexer and ultimately fed to the transmitter via the studio to transmitter link.
So as we go through, don't change yet, but as we go through this, we're trying to keep a kind of a common theme. Left-hand side is where the content is, where the content gets squished. Adding other information that allows the receiver and the viewer to know what to do. We move it into a combiner, if you will, and then onto the transmitter. So we're keeping this theme as we go through. We're going to show you how the system evolved from ATSC 1, switch.
So we had ATSC 1.0, and we weren't happy enough with that, so we went to work on adding mobility. And that became A153. And to get to A153, we had to add a few things. We had to add a new encoder, a Moving Picture Expert Group 4 encoder, which did not output transport stream, but rather internet protocol. And with that, we had to add an electronic system or service guide and some signaling, and that information, again, came out as internet protocol, which fed into an encapsulation and signal frequency network device that was an MPEG transport stream. I'm sorry. I guess I have to get $1 out. So we have this transport stream that feeds again to the studio to transmitter link. In this case, because we added the capability for single frequency networking, we also have the ability to feed multiple studio to transmitter links. So that's pretty much where we are, except we weren't happy with the ability to deliver alerting to mobile devices. So we continued on and modified the standard, the A153 standard, by adding Part 10, which added mobile emergency alert system capability. And that required a content manager to manage the content which went into the internet protocol stream, right?
Right. So what you'll note is we took the initial basic system, again, encoding, multiplexing, so on, again with the metadata. We added a parallel encoder to handle the mobile information. A lot of stuff in parallel. Similar things, but being done especially for the mobile. And they all combined and went out in the transmission. So you sort of see the trend, you see the boxes. What you're now going to see as we move into ATSC3 is instead of doing things special for mobile and special for fixed, we're doing it one way that can be repurposed. You'll start seeing more boxes, but the boxes serve the same functions.
So here we are at the beginning of the ATSC 3.0 system, and again, we have a method for encoding the audio-video information. We have a segmenter and, in essence, a multiplexer that takes the bits and puts them into the Internet protocol, which is going to be the transport method for ATSC 3.0.
So it's the same kind of stuff, it's just we're doing it a little bit differently. We're following the internet, we're doing it more similar to the internet. These boxes are functional blocks, they're likely to collapse into a box. But we just wanted to show the different functions. You can think of this as similar to the encoder we had before and the multiplexer. Now there's other stuff that gets moved in, closed captioning, non-real-time information, which includes the service guide, other data. They all kind of combine into this multiplexer sender. Okay.
So now we have to get the transport stream sent off to the transmitter, and to do that we have to prepare the signal in such a way that the modulator, which is at the transmitter site, is signaled to perform the right physical air pipes, and to do that we have a gateway product. The gateway becomes the front end of the modulation system that drives transmitter or transmitters via the studio to transmitter links.
Yeah. And the one twist, this scheduler gateway, we're now dealing with not one pipe, but multiple pipes. Different levels of robustness, different, targeted for mobile, targeted for fixed. We have to make sure that all the information that we encode here ends up in the right pipe at the right time. We don't put more things in the pipe can support. We don't leave bits on the floor by not putting enough in. This scheduler has a fairly important role. It's doing a lot of things, but making sure that everything gets to the right place at the right time.
So we add to the system, again, electronic service guide, signaling, and advanced emergency alerting, which again has to be managed and fed into the various pipes.
And the other thing to note here is even though it's new forms of information, the workflow, the sources, they're pretty much what they used to be. You're getting the same information, you're encoding it a little bit differently, you're inserting it a little bit differently, but it's really changing a box, not your workflow.
So one of the unique features about the ATSC 3.0 system is there are a lot of handles, a lot of knobs that can be turned to achieve different results. And because you have the capability for up to 64 different physical air pipes and knobs on each one of those pipes, you can sort of imagine one guy trying to dial all the dials and coordinate things based on time of day and the different types of content that go down the pipe. So the group that Merrill Weiss heads up came up with the idea that we really need something to kind of manage all these events. So therefore we have a system manager, probably a computer with software that talks to all of the various boxes in the system.
Nothing to say there.
Okay, over the top.
3.0 is not only about delivery over broadcast, it's also about delivery over broadband in a way that they can be combined, synchronized, services can be composed of elements from each. So you see a path up on the top, which is essentially analogous to what's on the bottom. May not be separate boxes, but you have the same functionality. You need to be able to create the segments. You need to be able to send them, multiplex them at the right time. When you're going over broadband, it's not going to a tower, it's going to a content distribution network, as was described earlier this morning. So this is really in parallel and in combination. You'll also note that clocks are appearing. Because we've decided to base things on a universal time, the time needs to be known at different places. There are protocols for this, and I'm not going to fall into the acronym trap. We all know what they are. But it's just pointing out that we need to be aware of time at lots of different places, but the means have evolved to do that, and do that in a fairly elegant and simple manner.
Okay, so at the other end of the studio to transmitter link, out there in the hinterland where the tower is located and the power amplifier, we have something called a modulator. And the modulator is consisting of a whole series of different processes, but all basically down into, typically a modulator today would be a one RU, one rack unit device that fits into the transmitter and generates the actual signal that gets amplified by the transmitter and broadcast over the air. So don't be alarmed by all the numbers of boxes up there. It's really one device.
So here we just tried to show, as you go from today's system to tomorrow's system, our familiar boxes and functions, how do they change? How do they evolve? And in ATSC 1.0, we have encoders for fixed, we have encoders for mobile. Well, now we have one encoder that serves both. Multiple formats, multiple streams, whatever you want to do, but it's one functional block. We needed an adapter to handle mobile. We needed adapters to handle single frequency networks. Well, we have the gateway and scheduler that does all of this stuff. It's a core part of the system. We needed a server for the program system information protocol. I should know that one better. Anyways, we've actually broken this up a little bit. We've broken it into signaling parts and announcement parts instead of mushing them together in a way that got kind of awkward. But again, it's a box that takes care of all of this based on the same information we needed before. We don't need anything special anymore for mobile because mobile is part of broadcast. It's a core part. There's a studio transmitter link. It's still needed, but it's probably going to change a bit because we're doing things a little bit differently. It's no longer a single bit rate that goes out in the emission, so we've got to deal with all that. Of course, the exciter, all the transmitter parts, well, it's not 1.0 anymore, it's 3.0. And we still have to monitor. We're just monitoring different things. So the blocks are still the same, they just evolve.
So then the question was raised to us about what are the ATSC 3.0 considerations during repack? And I think there are basically three that you have to be aware of. One, is your exciter software upgradable so that when you start out with 1.0, you can migrate to 3.0 when the appropriate time comes. The second is, do you have enough peak headroom in the transmitter to be able to accommodate the peak to average power ratio that is created by the waveform that's generated with ATSC 3.0. And the third is, of course, if mobile is on your agenda, which most likely it is if you're moving to 3.0 early in the game, vertical polarization for improved mobile as well as indoor reception is going to be essential. So those are the three things I think you need to keep in mind as you move forward during repack, which likely will occur sometime in the next year to year and a half as the starting point. So with that, Rich?
That's it. I think we now know why acronyms were invented. It's really awkward to say the entire name of things. And we simplified it quite a bit, but there is kind of a natural evolution. It's not, there's new stuff, there's new technologies. It shouldn't be all that scary.
I don't know that the $1 is going to buy much at the bar tonight, but at least it's a start.
Are there any questions?
Pat?
I think that it's important to note you said MPEG-4 instead of MPEG-2 compression, that it's not MPEG-4 part 2, it's MPEG-4 part 10. And that's a distinction worth noting
I think I only said MPEG 4.
MPEG 4, but there's two video compression schemes in
H.264.
We're talking about
Right, correct.
But that is really hard to say without making a,
advanced video compression.
okay. Any other questions?
Wayne?
Yeah. Could you go back to the slide that has the boxes for the exciter? Yeah. We've just finished this first part candidate standard for the so-called bootstrap. Can you point out what part of this exciter is the bootstrap and what part isn't?
I think the bootstrap actually occurs back at the gateway. That'd be my, where, George?
Just in front of the, just in front of the over there.
That box? Is that where it's generated? Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Any others?
Oh. We're thinking here. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Could you go back to the slide, the repacking considerations, one of those last slides? So are these three items or items that a broadcaster would have control over while doing the repacking? But are there other considerations in the transition? Assuming the two wouldn't link, the repacking and HSC, I'm assuming these are not the only three that will have to deal.
So Lana, this was done with the assumption that there was no linking.
Right.
Now, in other words, 3.0 transition would not occur at the same time as repack. So what do you need to be aware of during repack to plan for the future? What are the things, so you don't end up buying a new antenna again, or you don't buy a new exciter again, or that you buy a transmitter of sufficient size to accommodate a transition to 3.0 rather than having to add to your transmitter later.
And this might be too general of a question, but assuming that I'm a broadcaster, I'm aware of all of these, and I say yes, I've handled all of those, how much of the transition to ATSC 3.0, how much would that ease the transition in terms of like percentage of change or percentage of cost? Can you ballpark that at all, or is that too general?
I can give you some general ideas. Exciters, for example, today are probably list price in the $35,000 range, somewhere around there. I don't, encoders, Pat?
We don't really track that these days, but it's probably around 20K.
Per channel, so it depends on how many program streams you intend to have. And systems that generate signaling and guides.
8, 10.
Gateway product, Gerard, any idea? Joe Cecilia. Joe?
I don't make such products.
Do you have any idea though? 12 to 15,000 for a gateway. So, you know, we're not talking huge dollars in the overall scheme of things. And certainly in the repack process, if you buy the right size transmitter, then you're not going back later and adding power to accommodate the waveform.
Is the major cost to be the antenna and RF filter?
Yeah. So I think the message is if you have to take care of this during repack, do it so that when 3.0, if they are separate, do it so that you don't have to do it again.
Right. Mark?
How's the FCC going to feel about putting up a antenna for polarization and replacing it that doesn't have it?
Can't answer that question at this point. I'm just pointing out the items of consideration, right?
Probably wise to track that extra cost.
What was the question?
Wanted to know what how the FCC is going to feel about, for example, if you only have horizontal polarization going into repack and the antenna that you replace it with might have vertical capabilities as well. Well, in this case, it's being bought for you by the repack funding. So,
Glenn?
So that was the longest explanation I've ever heard without any TLAs, three-letter acronyms. That was great, guys. This was a great discussion about sort of the equipment upgrade, but I think one of the things that is probably on a lot of people's mind is how would I affect a transition scenario from 1.0 to 3.0 and not just completely turn off my my audience in what has come to be called a flash cut. Would the two of you make a few comments about what are some of the technical possibilities for having a little bit of a simulcast transition and what that might look like with a little bit of 1.0 and a little bit of 3.0?
gee, I thought there were greater minds than the two up here that were working on that. Well, certainly the one that I've heard and is being talked about is the ability to, in a market, assign certain stations to 1.0, certain stations to 3.0, and in essence channel share and duplicate programming in both modes over a period of time to allow receiver base to be sufficient enough to finally say it's time to turn off 1.0. Dave, I think you're involved in some of that. Are we on target? Is that? Yeah? I don't know if any other way. I mean, we've already been told we won't have a second channel, so.
There are plenty of technical ways. That's coming up with a technical solution is real easy. Coming up with the solution that works from business and regulatory and reaction of viewers, that's a lot harder. I mean, yeah, flash cut. Technically, it works. I'm not going to say anybody thinks that's a good idea, but so, and we've been, in ATSC, we're focusing primarily on the technical, enable the things. Other organizations, now we have had discussions to help other organizations, but other organizations are working on the scenarios from very different viewpoints and have a much better perspective to be able to answer that. Reaction quick, flash cut is probably not a good idea. The share and collapse later, that actually sounds quite interesting. Bill.
Yeah, I just was going to, on the subject of what the FCC will cover with the vertical component, the last thing I read regarding reimbursement costs was the FCC was not going to cover anything that added to your capabilities, only what you're doing now. So if you have a horizontal antenna, they'll pay for a horizontal antenna. If you add vertical to it, that's your cost.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean you have to buy a horizontal antenna. You could probably add to the, right?
Well, I mean, if you're not replacing your antenna,
No, if you're replacing your antenna,
right?
you could probably supplement the funding and
The way
get,
I understood it was is that if you do something like that, they would want to see what the horizontal only version would cost.
right.
Then they'll approve that, and then you make up the difference.
Yeah, and the difference, when you factor in the rigging and all the other stuff that would have to go on to replace that antenna, it's relatively minor dollars compared to doing it again.
Okay, I think,
Mark over here was first, I think.
okay.
Can you address at all the receive side? So if it's a TV set, that's the manufacturer's, but if the assumed device is a tablet or a mobile phone or something in the future, antennas that will work there, or the technology implications, or is there discussions going on with those device manufacturers as well as TV set manufacturers to complete the ecosystem?
I don't think either of us are consumer experts. I personally have a favorite model in the transition, and there are other consumer folks here that probably could do a better job, but my personal thoughts on a transition device is a home gateway device that is a combination router and tuner and Wi-Fi access
Like a tablet TV?
that would allow you to, through an app, tune a station in and then broadcast it via Wi-Fi throughout your house and receive it on various devices.
Well, you
I
could do
think
that
that's an
today with
awesome
1.0. You don't need
approach.
3.0 for that model, though.
True. But that is a model that actually makes 3.0 fairly easy to get into a home, especially when you consider the technical knowledge of many people at home. Plop this box in, it works. That's one. I've heard of people toying with the idea of add-on tuners or things for phones or tablets that combine a battery. And by the way, there's a tuner in there and a lot of other things. I think there's a lot of people experiment or thinking of experimenting. There's a lot of possibilities. Mostly,
And
I want
that's
to
up
leave
to
this to
them.
the CEA guys to talk about, because
Sure, that's up to them.
I'm
to
at the
come
other
up
end
with
of
that.
the
I was
business.
just wondering if there was a whole
The
ecosystem.
beauty of the gateway product is it now gives you access on multiple devices, different types of devices, depending upon what you want to watch on.
Okay, thank you.
Related to, first, what you guys have done with ATSC 3.0 just the last year is fantastic. But related to that, I feel that there's been a toolbox laid out of all different sorts of options broadcasters can choose from. What organizations are out there today working on the business side so that we can take a lot of these different pieces and with one voice as broadcasters, put those pieces together into something that is a strong business plan that makes sense that everybody can come in on? And then secondly, but it may be related to the same group, who is doing similar like actions?
So I scanned the room looking for Ann. Ann's not in the room, but Sterling's in the room. It's a group called Pearl. Sterling?
Yeah, there is a group that you heard from Ann Shelley, is a business organization called Pearl, which consists of 9 broadcast groups. And they are certainly working very hard on all this stuff. A lot of it's in the background at the moment, but getting the industry coalesced around an overall business plan and business needs. A lot of research going on in terms of new business opportunities, values of revenue, and all kinds of processes like that that are going on currently. You'd kind of think NAB might be doing something like that, but NAB is a trade organization, and they aren't eligible to talk about business issues internally inside that organization. So it kind of has to be somebody outside of NAB, just the way the world works with trade organizations.
Transitional as well, where you guys focus?
Yes, including transition.
Ann Shelley's the one with the rubber chicken. She can feel a lot of confidence in her ability to lead.
Although we understand it's soon to become a tax.
Any other questions? None? Thank you for being a great audience.